Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of the Blackbird Grimoire. Welcome back to Pagan Tales. Today, for our conclusion of our divine couples for the month of May, we're going to be taking a look at Hades and Persephone. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you've probably heard me express that there seems to be a lack of affinity between myself and most of the Greco-Roman deities. However, Hades and Persephone are proving to be a slight exception. So if there's any further developments as time goes along with that, well, you will be duly informed. But I do want to make it clear that I don't have that same don't bother me kind of relationship between these particular deities and the other members of the pantheon. I don't know why this should be, but there it is. So Hades, his parents are Kronos and Rhea. They were Titans. His siblings are Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, and Hestia. His wife, of course, is Persephone, and his role in the pantheon is to be the king of the underworld, and he is the god of the dead, not the god of death. That's Thanatos, but he is the god who presides over the dead once they have already arrived. Now, Persephone, her parents are generally considered to be Zeus and Demeter. She doesn't have any full siblings. She has many half-siblings, but they were so numerous, I didn't feel like we needed to get into it here. Her husband is Hades, and her role is the Spring Maiden as Kor, and then Queen of the Underworld as Persephone. And of course, most of you are aware from the myths that she goes back and forth in between. So let's talk about the relationship of Hades and Persephone and how we are subjected to competing narratives, depending what sources we're really looking at. The first controversy is, was Persephone abducted and ravished by Hades, or did she run away with Hades willingly? And then we also have the issue of Zeus actually did grant Hades permission to marry Persephone. So was this by force, or was she good with this? We don't really know because we get different stories from different sources. Then was Persephone tricked into eating the pomegranate seeds in the underworld, or did she choose to? And if she chose to, was she aware of the consequences? That's another ongoing controversy. And then Demeter, was she just a distraught mother who was desperate to get her daughter back, or was she a controlling mother who wanted her daughter to forever remain the Spring Maiden and not advance into adulthood? Again, we don't know. And not only is there confusion about this in the ancient lore, when we have authors that do fairly faithful retellings of the myths, there also seems to be a great deal of difference in perspective. Some authors have written modern books about the tale of Hades and Persephone, and was this very adversarial, not good, forced thing. And then with others, it was just, there's a little bit more nuance. And with others, like, no, Persephone and Demeter did not have a particularly healthy relationship. Persephone and Hades did actually properly fall in love, and their main conflict of their story was trying to navigate Persephone's obligations to both the waking world and the underworld. So I would encourage people to listen to your instincts on this matter. And also look at the clues and what narratives that we do have. The first thing is that unlike Zeus and Poseidon, Hades wasn't in the habit of, spreading his seed far and wide. Not really what he was up to. And also, unlike his brothers, who treated their wives and consorts and mistresses very differently, and just kind of like, oh, yes, you're here, but you don't really matter in any particular way. By contrast, Hades' queen Persephone, she held considerable power and authority in his realm. That is really where it really makes a difference. They became essentially co-consorts of the realm of the dead, which was very, very different. And again, we also have the clue that Zeus did consent to the match between Hades and Persephone. Some say that he just granted Hades Persephone permission, like, yeah, you can abduct her, and I'm her father, so if I say it's okay, then therefore it's okay, which, certainly not how we do things in the modern day, but some people say that was essentially how things were done in some parts of ancient Greece. Then there are others who say that, yes, Zeus consented to the match, and it was willing on both sides. So, again, we've got to really look at the lore and also look to our instincts. And then we also have the additional clue is that after Persephone went into the underworld, Demeter just flat out refused to do her duty. She said, until I have my daughter back exactly the way I want her, I'm not going to make the grain grow. I'm not going to participate in any part of the agricultural cycle, and the humans are just going to starve. So that certainly that does, I think, raise the question of, was she just so distraught as a mother that she simply could not go on with her customary work, just regardless of the consequences, or was she using this as a manipulative tactic to get what she wanted? I mean, it really depends on your interpretation here. And then our final clue that we're going to look at is that Hades and Persephone in the lore, they seem to get along. Which is more than could be said for most of the other Greek deities and their spouses. This is almost unique. They were actually getting along. So when we look at all of this, and I think on balance, I'm thinking, I don't think that Penelope was ravished away. This doesn't feel like a forced situation, even if her father decreed, yes, you shall marry Hades, and that's how it's going to be. I don't think she was necessarily opposed to the idea, and it doesn't seem that it just. I don't buy that this was, abduction and rape and all of these other things that we would really look down upon today. It just, all of my instincts are saying, no, that's not really what was going on here. But again, that's just my instincts. You will have to inform your own evaluations on that. So let's look about how Persephone and Hades, what they really represent, this union of life and death. And beyond that union, it also illustrates the relationship between life and death, about how they are this indivisible thing. And the pomegranate seeds that, bound Persephone to the underworld, that underlines really that there can be no life without death or vice versa. And with Persephone having a status that was on par with that of Hades, within the underworld at least, that further shows that there's balance and harmony between life and death, and these are states of being that are two sides of one coin. Now, if your background is in witchcraft, this idea of life and death being this two sides of the same coin, back and forth kind of infinity relationship, this is not a new idea to you at all. In fact, that probably makes perfect sense, and that might also have you lean more so towards this was actually a good marriage that was going on, because they were both doing their part. They were both in this cooperative, energetic union. So if we look at the married life of Hades and Persephone, I don't really see much suggestion that there was infidelity on either side. Some sources say yes, but I don't know. Just something about it, just like, I don't know about that. Hades, by all accounts, appears to be devoted to Persephone. We can't say the same of Zeus and Hera. Not by any stretch of the imagination. And Persephone's return to the surface, that seems to be more about duty and perhaps affection for her mother than a desire to escape her husband, which seems pretty significant. I mean, after all, if you were forced to be with your husband, I think a little bit more of that, I am going to escape him for this period of time of the year. I just feel like that would have shown through in the storytelling. And now the children of both Zeus and Persephone, this again, it looks like there's some confusion, some debatability, so just take all of this with a grain of salt. But it is generally agreed upon that their sons were Zagreus and Plutus, and that their daughters were Macaria and Melano. Now, the interesting thing about Melano is that she was said to have half of her body white, half of her body black. If you're familiar with Norse mythology, you'd be like, that sounds very similar to the goddess Hel. It was the daughter of Loki and Agrabota. So that was just kind of an interesting commonality. And it'll be interesting, as I continue my own explanations and as you continue yours, if you find that these children of the underworld, or people who are associated with death, if they also have that, and this half of the body was white and half of the body was black. And isn't that an interesting thing? I am curious to see other examples of this pattern. We only have, I can think of 2 examples right now. I'd like to see if there are more, because then we might be really getting to somewhere. So I want to talk about the correspondences of Hades and Persephone. With Hades, his association with the zodiac is Sagittarius, whereas with Persephone, it's more Virgo and Scorpio, which I find very interesting. I think that does reflect kind of the dual aspects of her nature. Persephone is associated with and within the solar system of both the moon and the planet Pluto. I think arguably you could uh, also associate Hades with the planet Pluto, although not all the sources reference that. But I think it's a reasonable thing. For the celebrations, Hades is specifically associated with Samhain, which makes perfect sense because that is the Feast of the Dead. And Persephone, she's associated with Mabon, Astara, Lunasa, and Twelfth Night. Hades is associated with the number 13, which is interesting because in the craft, the number 13 correlates to a goddess number, the amount of full moons you might have in the course of a year. Persephone is associated with the element of earth for obvious reason. And you'll notice that Hades and Persephone are both associated with a variety of trees, but interestingly, they're both associated with the poplar tree. But with Hades, it's the white poplar, and with Persephone, it's the black poplar. Now, you would think it would be the other way around, seeing as how Hades is the god of the dead, his realm is the underworld itself, whereas Persephone is just a part-time married-in resident. So I thought that was very interesting, and it made me think of the yin-yang symbol of all things, about how even within the dark, there's that little seed of the light, and within the light there's that seed of the dark. So just I don't know, just it seemed like an interesting correlation to me. Other interesting things, of course, we know that Hades is associated with dogs, particularly with the three-headed Cerberus, whereas Persephone was associated with bats, which I thought that was interesting. They're both linked with the screech owl, and Hades is associated with the reptile being the snake, which does make a lot of sense just because snakes have a strong mythological correlation with death and the underworld, and also with that process of regeneration, which Hades' realm, it is that place of the dead, but it is also a place of regeneration because, of course, life can only spring forth from things which have died. It's, again, you cannot separate life and death. They are feeding into each other. So, some common powers that Hades and Persephone have are acceptance, the acceptance of what is, the acceptance of their situation, the acceptance of Persephone, despite having been brought up in the full fruitage of the earth all of the time for most of her existence, she's also the queen of the underworld, accepting her role in that. And then Hades also accepting that his wife can only ever be a part-time resident of his realm. That's a very interesting thing. Of course, they're both tied and have the powers linked with the afterlife. I think even honestly, you could make the argument that they are both associated with the agriculture because, of course, with the agricultural year, there is that season of death, that winter season where things are simply resting. Let's see. They're both linked with the underworld, of course. They're both linked with death. I would say that they're also would be arguably both linked with wisdom and the correlation of patience, the wisdom that is gained through patience, because both of them are having to exercise that because of their marital and their family arrangements. So that was just a couple of things I wanted to touch on there, showing their genuine points of connection. So ultimately, I think the relationship of Hades and Persephone represents the completed circuit, infinity, the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And I think also what we can learn from this for our own relationships is that in a marriage, the couple, they should have this feedback loop of interdependence, support, and intimacy, of that no matter what they're going through, they're always going through it back together, and they're in this constant exchange of energies. And it's about weaving together an existence that ideally cannot be torn asunder, no matter what challenges you might face to that relationship. So that's where my thoughts took me with regards to Hades and Persephone. I would be very curious about your own perception of them. What version of the lore do you think is most accurate and most consistent with what you've observed and in your dealings with these deities? I'm very curious. I think this could be a pretty interesting discussion in the comments. So I hope I do hear from you in the comments about this couple. But if you'd like to have a bit more of a one-on-one conversation about these two, please feel free to email me at brigantiablackbird@protonmail.com, and we can have a discussion there. But that's where we'll leave it for today. Next week, we'll come back and we'll be focusing upon solar deities, because we are going into the summer solstice. The sun will be at its height, so we're going to have this shift of focus in this Pagan Tales series. So I hope you'll be back for that. And in the meantime, I'll see you guys later. So bye-bye.